All right, if we could continue, thank you very much for your consideration. Moving on to the second item on the docket, again, the preliminary plan of subdivision, docket 19-12 for Amber Ridge. Again, the recommendations of the planning, of the advisory planning board taken at this hearing will be filled with the city council, who will make the final decision. Any person of record may appeal the decision of the advisory planning board to the city council within 15 days after notice of the board's recommendation. The hearing tonight will involve presentation by city staff, followed by presentation of the applicant. Board members will have an opportunity to ask questions of staff and the applicant following their presentations. The board will also have an opportunity to ask questions of those who spoke during the hearing. Board members will then be polled for their comments, if any, prior to a motion. If there's anyone here tonight that will be presenting, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the statements you're about to give are true to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief? All right, thank you. Please be seated. And I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Stevens, please, for the staff's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Frank Stevens for from the city planning staff. What I'd like to suggest, Mr. Chairman, is that you also acknowledge that we're going to do the next case at the same time, but when it comes to the motion, that you do two separate motions, one for the subdivision and one for the detailed site plan. So if you could call DSP 19040 into the record, and then we'll start with the subdivision, we'll go over that, and then we'll go into the detailed site plan.
Okay, acknowledged. Thank you very much, sir. We will also be looking at the detailed site plan, docket 1913, which is also Amber Ridge.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Stevens, before we get started, I just want to, since they look pretty much the same thing, except for there's, obviously more detailed. In the event that the preliminary plan is shot down, then we don't have to hear the detailed, right?
Theoretically, that's correct.
Okay.
But we're going to, like, for informational purposes, so you have that background, we can cover them both.
Right. But the usual chain of events is that the preliminary is approved or rejected.
Right.
And if it's approved, then we go into the detailed. If it's rejected, then whatever outstanding questions or concerns have to be brought forward before the detailed can be voted on, correct?
That's right. That's why we suggested two separate motions. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Frank.
So let's start with preliminary plan of subdivision 4-19032 for Amber Ridge. This first slide is in the staff report. It's an illustrative plan which shows the location of this particular property. It's on the west side of southbound US 301. It encompasses 19 acres. It's to the south of the South Bowie Community Center. It's about 0.3 of a mile south of the Mitchellville Road intersection and about 550 feet north of the Pointer Ridge Drive intersection. The property is zoned MXT, mixed-use transportation oriented. We've discussed in our report the background information of this particular site. Has a long history. Most recently, there were a zoning map amendment and then a conceptual site plan approved for the site within the last 5 years. There was a stakeholders meeting held for both the subdivision and the detailed site plan on October 30th, and we've provided a summary of that meeting in our report. The subdivision is to create 2 commercial retail lots along 301. Parcel 1 is about 0.98 acres, and parcel 2 is about 1.56 acres. And in addition to those 2, the subdivision also includes 200 townhouse lots. In order to approve a subdivision pursuant to Subtitle 24, 2 findings need to be made, and those include that adequate public facilities exist or are programmed for the area, and that the subdivision is designed in accordance with woodland conservation and tree preservation. The TCP for this site has been approved. Also, a submission of a stormwater management concept plan should be provided. We have received one, and that's also been approved by Prince George's County. We've discussed adequate public facilities on or near the site with respect to water and sewer, police facilities, fire and rescue, school facilities, and traffic issues. And with respect to traffic issues, what we're recommending is, based upon the submission and review of a new traffic impact study for this particular project, a new trip cap for the development. We've discussed that on page 7 of our report, as well as several other items with respect to the transportation street network in the vicinity. This particular slide is also in the staff report and includes the actual subdivision preliminary plan in showing the 202 lots that are proposed as part of the project. This attachment is attachment 3. It's the stormwater management concept plan, which has been approved by Prince George's County. Basically, the stormwater plan proposes to manage stormwater using several on-site landscape micro bioretention facilities and the large existing wet stormwater pond in the northeastern corner of the property. Attachment 4 is shown on the screen, which is the Woodland Conservation Plan, which has been approved by Prince George's by Park and Planning, and the application is proposing to manage woodland conservation off-site, and what we're suggesting is that an off-site location be one that's within the same sub-watershed as development and as close to the city as possible. With respect to conformance with the master plan, both the preliminary subdivision and the detailed site plan are proposing a mixed-use project comprised of retail, commercial, and residential uses, which are in conformance with the mixed-use land use designation adopted in the 2006 master plan. We've, with that, we've recommended approval of this particular preliminary plan with 4 conditions that are identified on page 9 of our staff report. I'm just going to take a second and go to the detailed site plan PowerPoint show. And we can follow along with that. It's detailed site plan DSP 19040. Again, the same illustrative site plan that we saw with the preliminary plan, 301 over here, the 2 commercial lots and the 200 townhouse lots. These next several slides are regarding the architecture of the units that's proposed for the several townhouse units. 16-foot wide townhomes. You can see the different types of articulation that's proposed in each unit: full brick, partial brick, different window treatments, et cetera, for the front elevations. The rear elevation includes garage, possible deck, and these higher units, or like a fourth story, is a potential fourth floor attic build-out area. And this elevation indicates the end walls of those units, partial brick, several windows, or siding on an end. That's for one particular model. There are other models in the project that are included in these slides by the different builders. These are the 20-foot wide units, and the backs have two-car garage. Again, the proposed possible four-story build-out attic, finished attic upstairs, and the end walls. These are the 24-foot wide townhouse units with front-loaded garages, and the rears of those units, side elevation, and another builder with these also 24-foot wide units and two-car garages, rear elevations, and side elevations. There are a couple of amenities proposed in this development, including a play area of about 2,000 square feet or so, and this slide indicates the types of equipment that could be located within that play area. Also, there is a walking system that's proposed, and a portion of that would be a trellis-covered walkway with benches and they're located in an eastern side of the project. This is the landscape plan. These next few slides indicate that. Again, we're recommending that the white pines be replaced with American holly. There's an extensive sidewalk system that's proposed on both sides of the main thoroughfare throughout the development. There's a proposed pedestrian connection from this site onto the South Bowie Community Center property and out to Pittsfield Lane. And this is the southern half of the property with the landscaping and the buffering that's proposed along the southern property line. We're recommending that some landscaping be installed in the median off of 301, since there is none proposed at this time. So we would recommend that that be upgraded to include some landscaping. There's a signage feature in this location right here. As you pull into the site from 301, the Amber Ridge sign is here. That pergola that I mentioned and saw on a previous slide is located in this vicinity right here behind the sign. This slide is an attachment in the staff report. It's the stormwater management concept plan, which indicates an infiltration area here and the main stormwater receiving area in the northeastern corner of the site. And the last slide is the Woodland Conservation TCP1 plan that's been approved by Prince George's by Park and Planning. With that, we are recommending approval of this particular detailed site plan with the conditions stated on page 11 in our report. We have two modifications to conditions 1A and 1B. The other conditions remain the same. And those changes will be, first to 1A, that at least 60% of the full front facades shall have brick, stone, or stucco on the front elevations. And 1B is that a partial brick, stone, stucco, or a minimum of 3 architectural features on side elevations be constructed on the lots that we've mentioned in that particular condition. The lots haven't changed. And then an additional sentence in that condition would be, if the minimum of 3 architectural features are full-size windows, then shutters and embellishments / architectural trim used on the windows on the front elevation shall also be provided on those windows on the side elevations. And the goal of that is to enhance the visual appearance and quality of those side elevations on those particular units that we've identified in 1B. So with those modifications to which the applicant has agreed, we're recommending approval.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Would the applicant please step forward for your presentation? And if you please, for the record, state your name.
Of course.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Matthew Tedesco with the law firm of McNamee Hosey, here on behalf of the contract purchaser and applicant, CBR Amber Ridge LLC. I want to take a moment, if I could, to just introduce, we have a number of people here prepared to answer any questions you may have if I'm unable to, but my hope and goal is to answer all your questions and be responsive to any of the community members that may be here. With me this evening on behalf of CBR Amber Ridge LLC is Mr. Ed Gold. We do have representatives of Rogers Consulting, who are the engineers of the project, Mr. Alex Villegas and Mr. Phil Hughes. We have Mike Lenhart with the Lenhart Traffic Consulting Group. We also have representatives of both builders who will be involved in this project. From MBR, we have Jessica McMahon and Lisa McCauley. And from Caruso Homes, we have Mr. Andy Garish. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you may recall we have been here a number of times on this project. I think Mr. Stevens, and before I forget, I want to thank your staff, both Mr. Stevens and Mr. Meinhardt. We don't have any modifications to the staff report, as well as the conditions to include the modification of conditions 1A and B of the detailed site plan that Mr. Stevens referenced just a moment ago. We are in agreement with the conditions. We do appreciate their work on this project. We have met with them and have thoroughly vetted this project with them. But as you all may recall, we have been before you a few times over the last 5 or 6 years. This project does have a history going back to the late 80s through the 90s. I personally have been involved in it since at least 2006 or 7, I would say. And it's kind of come a long way to where we are today. It was originally zoned commercial shopping center, CSC. It was fully approved, subdivided, platted, even permitted for 180 to 200,000 square foot shopping center. The shopping center was envisioned on the back portion of a traditional suburban shopping center layout, with the center towards the back of the property, the western side, with a field of parking in the front. With the change in market, with the Giant leaving the Point Ridge Shopping Center and moving farther north, as well as just the climate of the commercial world over the last 10 years, there was never ability to obtain an anchor tenant for the commercial shopping center. In 2012, 13, 14 time, 2012 or 13, the property owner, which is RWSC LLC, which is made up of members of the Rappaport company, so you all are familiar with, approached the team and the city planning staff and looked at what can we do with this property. It is not currently in the city of Bowie, let me mention that. It's not currently within the municipal boundary, although it abuts the municipal boundary. There has been a desire over many, many years for the property to be annexed. It has not yet gone through that process. There is a willingness of the contract purchaser, CBR Amber Ridge LLC, to annex if that is the desire of the city. We are furthering that discussion as we speak, but no, we haven't moved forward completely on that. But it is not currently within the city of Bowie. However, at that time, we looked and studied the 2006 master plan for Bowie and vicinity. That master plan for the Pointer Ridge mixed-use community recommended mixed-use zoning for the property to accommodate the Pointer Ridge Mixed-Use Activity Center. With that recommendation in the planning documents, we move forward with a rezoning to the MXT to accommodate a mixed-use project on the property. That was done in 2014. As we indicated back then, if the property were successfully rezoned to MXT, the MXT zone, one of the benefits of it, in addition to flexibility in uses, and provided for a mix of uses, is that it requires a fairly lengthy but informative process through the conceptual site plan, preliminary plan, and then detailed site plan. So we went through the conceptual site plan process in 2017, appeared before this body, appeared before the city council, and ultimately the planning board for the county. That, excuse me, that was approved in April of 2017. And so now we are before you, as promised, to discuss the preliminary plan of subdivision, which is really the creation of the two commercial parcels along the frontage and the 200 fee simple lots for the townhouses on the west side. In addition to that, we are here on the detailed site plan, but the detailed site plan is only for the residential portion. We do not yet have a detailed site plan for the commercial. We don't yet have tenants for that. As tenants become available or are known, we will come forward with a detailed site plan on the commercial pieces. So I just want to be clear that the detailed site plan is limited to the residential only at this time. As Mr. Stevens mentioned, the preliminary plan proposes 200 fee simple lots for the townhouses. Those townhouses are a mix of 16-foot wide units, 20-foot wide units, and 24-foot wide units. Two builders, as I mentioned, being NVR and Caruso, will build those homes, and we are very excited to move this project forward in that regard. I think and I hope that the plans that you have before you and as provided for by Mr. Stevens articulate really the thought and the process that has gone into this with respect to really transitioning the property from what it is today to what it really was ultimately planned to be, which is a mixed-use center, to accommodate and to further the existing residential community to the west, as well as the existing commercial and office to the south. We have strategically located the commercial along the 301 corridor for obvious reasons, and transition to the residential as you move east to west, and then having a fairly significant buffer as required with the conceptual site plan along the western side of the property to buffer the townhouses from the existing single-family homes. I would mention, and this came up at the stakeholders meeting, there were some comments and concerns about the buffering from the townhouses to the existing single-family residential on the west. The way that the grades will work ultimately at final build-out is that this property will actually sit lower than the existing single-family homes. So those will sit up, so it won't be, the notion of the townhouses protruding over the single-family homes won't exist because we will be at a lower grade, and there is a fairly significant buffer. Mr. Stevens, if need be, can put up the landscape plan for the detailed site plan, and you can see just the sheer amount of plantings that are proposed on that western side. Traffic has been, probably the biggest talking point with respect to this project, both at the stakeholders meeting and prior approvals. Let me go on record by saying one of the things that the city council was really adamant about, and it's in your staff report, is providing a median break to allow full movement at the entrance of the site so that cars can go north on 301, median break with a light. That was something that was approved by SHA at the time that this was a shopping center. It was approved because at that time the density for a 200,000 square foot shopping center warranted a traffic light, warranted the median break for that movement. The proposal we have now before us, although mixed use, is a far less dense project than the shopping center. However, my client is fully committed, has budgeted, and is working diligently with the city and will continue to work with the city to try to get that approval in place, because that's something that the citizens have really echoed. I stand before you to say we are committed to that. However, we are not the permitting agency. The city is not the permitting agency. Prince George's County is not the permitting agency on that. It is the State Highway Administration. State Highway Administration has specific warrants that must be met. in order to justify not only the median break, but the median break with a light, both north and southbound, to stop north and southbound traffic. And so it'll be up to them to approve that. If they approve that, we will build it. The conditions you have before you, Mr. Stevens talks about that scenario. We've studied it. We've included it in our traffic impact study. But the conditions you have before you for the preliminary plan advance the recommendations of the traffic impact study if that median break is not approved, because we can't assume that it will be by State Highway Administration. However, the improvements that are proposed without the median break will mitigate the traffic impacts associated with this project. So although traffic on 301 we all recognize is challenged, the law requires that our project not impact that negatively any further than what's already existing. So we are required to mitigate over 100% of our impact, which those improvements that are outlined in your staff report, which we agree with, will do. Obviously, if the State Highway Administration approves the median break and the traffic signal, some of those improvements won't become necessary because that median break and intersection and that light will further mitigate any impact, and will create a scenario that allows us to not have to make all of the improvements that are listed in the condition. But so I wanted to clarify that. I think Mr. Stevens did a good job in the staff report given both scenarios. But given the fact that we don't know right now, as I stand before you, if the State Highway Administration will permit that median break and that intersection and that light, we have to assume worst case scenario that they won't. So we have other improvements to the road network that will mitigate our improvements. Being co-counsel on the previous case, although I wasn't asked to speak, Mr. Horn handled that matter. Hearing some of the comments that were said with schools, let me address that as it relates to this project, just try to get out in front of it. Mr. Stevens' report does go through the analysis of the impacts to the schools, something that wasn't mentioned in the prior case, but I'll mention in this one is, in addition to the fact that about 80 to 85% of the schools are only at capacity, 80 to 85% in your staff report, so there is capacity. But that aside, Prince George's County requires a school impact fee be paid. That wasn't mentioned before, but I want to make sure this body and the community knows that. For this property outside of the Beltway, it's over $16,000 a unit. So this project alone will generate over $3 million that is required to go into a special fund to be allocated to the county, admittedly, to be allocated for schools, and whether it's maintenance or improvements or however it's used. But so that is the onus of the requirements of the county and the onus of the developers. Not to backtrack, but it's worth mentioning that in South Lake, that number is close to $23 million. So it's a significant contribution financially, in addition to the fact that there is actually capacity. So that's really related to the preliminary plan of subdivision. With respect to the required findings of adequacy, the deep dive, Mr. Burr, that you mentioned, in that case was done with the preliminary plan of subdivision, which has long since been approved. It's now before you in this case, and I think Mr. Stevens' report, as well as all the documentation that we're required to provide, did exactly that from a stormwater management standpoint, from school facilities, from transportation adequacy, fire, police, rescue. It's all laid out in great detail in Mr. Stevens' report. And so all of the findings can be made, should be made, and with that being said, we respectfully request approval of the preliminary plan of subdivision. We agree with the conditions as provided in the preliminary plan of subdivision staff report, and again, for the reasons stated, we respectfully request this body's approval or recommendation of approval for the detailed site plan, and the conditions as articulated in the staff report as modified by Mr. Stevens, conditions 1A and B, and we would humbly request for your approval. I'm happy to answer any questions. I could continue to talk, but I think it's time for me to stop, so I'll stop. Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for staff for that? Mrs. Scholz.
You can add me to the list of people that have problems with the traffic issue. Counselor, I know that you said that, it was originally 200,000 down to 20,000, but when I start thinking of 20,000 square feet on 301, I'm thinking about high generators of traffic. And I think that your cap that you're mentioning is way off. And like I said before, especially when you talked about the whole state thing, I have some serious reservations to approve the preliminary. Again, the detail doesn't list anything with regards to the type of retail that's coming in. And again, I have a problem with that. Now, you know, if we were just talking about the preliminary tonight and we weren't dovetailing on the detailed right with it, I probably wouldn't have a problem with it. But there's just too many unanswered questions with regard to the traffic. And
So if I may, so I'm failing to fully understand your issue with the trip cap, because the way that the trip cap is structured and based upon the traffic impact study, we've made assumptions on the types of uses for that commercial. So if any commercial is proposed down the road that exceed the AM and PM trip cap, we can't do it.
well, I realize that.
And so-
And this is what I'm trying to get across, sir, is that based on this, it's saying that there's over 400 parking spots just for the townhouses alone. Well, you know, I'm not the brightest in math, but I start adding 2 and 2 together, and it ain't coming out to 4.
Well, it would be, we can further elaborate on it, but parking spaces include parking within the garage and the driveways, and then we have guest parking. So there's sufficient amount of parking. So the parking associated with the detailed site
Well, I
plan,
realize the parking's fine, sir, but what I'm trying to say is that I don't think it's actually captured with regards to the AM and the PM trips that you have, 221 and 242.
yeah, so the number of parking is not related to the number of trips.
Sir, I realize that. I've been
Okay,
doing this for
I'm
35
just trying to
years.
understand the
So
question.
yes, I understand that, sir.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that you're bringing a preliminary without any kind of information about high trip generation of retail, which I believe, based on what you've brought here and the location, that's what you're going to get. And when you start adding the high trip generation retail, even though it is 20,000 square feet, yeah, I'm sure that, you know.
Yeah, because I respectfully, I don't think that statement is accurate, because I think we have calculated that within the traffic impact study. So I'm going to let Mike address that,
Okay,
'cause
thanks.
maybe he can articulate it better than I am.
Good evening. My name is Mike Lenhart, traffic engineer for the project. So we have conducted a traffic study. Obviously, we have 20,000 square feet of retail. It will probably be less than that. We don't know exact uses at this point. That's why we went with a little higher square footage on the retail. Park and planning requirements for retail is a 50% pass by. So such that 50% of the traffic that uses the site is pass-by traffic that's already on Route 301. That pass-by traffic does not get credited against the trip cap. That's separate. There are many retail users that would go on pad sites like this that have higher pass-by than that. C-stores, fast foods, they can be upward of 60%. Some, not that we think there would be a gas station, but even gas stations could have 70% pass by. So we think that we've taken a conservative estimate with this. The study was based upon empirical data, standards and practices that are normal in the industry. It's being submitted to your staff, who have reviewed it. It's being submitted to State Highway Administration, who have 4 different departments within the state that will review it. Park and planning staff will review it. They're not going to just take this on our word. They're going to make sure that it meets all the standards and requirements. And you know, if they have questions, we'll address those as we go through it. But it has been conducted according to standard practices.
Well, I think you mentioned the key word. Your estimates are conservative. I'll rest my case with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I think I've voiced my concerns about this project over the years, and I understand the traffic is a concern, and that those numbers have been adequately studied and looked at in terms of the volume of traffic that's on that road. What concerns me most is the safe movement of that traffic in and out of this site. And when I look at the fact that there's, right now, we only know about a southbound left in, right out into the site. Maybe we'll get a median break, maybe we won't. So the worst case scenario is that if we don't get that median break, then what's going to happen is northbound traffic or traffic traveling from the south to the north, residential traffic that lives in this site, they're going to turn onto Pointer Ridge Drive and then onto Pointer Ridge Place to get to the site. And to me, that's just not going to work, because if anybody's been down there where the post office is, at any given time, you have cars parked on both sides of Pointer Ridge Place to access the post office, not including the traffic that's generated by Old Line Bank and by the condominium office park that's there in the back. And I have an office there, so I'm really concerned about the narrowness of Pointer Ridge Place and its ability to handle the existing traffic that's going to be, that's already there. And then when we're talking about the potential for 400 more cars to try and access the development using Pointer Ridge Place. I just don't see that as being safe movement of traffic. I don't think that that's going to be acceptable traffic condition. Then the next issue is traffic that's leaving the site that wants to go northbound on 301. Without the median break, traffic will have 200 yards to get over to the left lane so that it can make a U-turn at Pointer Ridge Drive. And with the volume of traffic that's already there, and then traffic coming out of the development to try and traverse the 2 lanes of traffic in such a short distance, I think that that's just going to be unsafe movement of traffic again.
Yeah, which is, and then, the fact, that we already have a traffic light at Mitchellville Road, and we have one at Pointer Ridge Drive. If we have a median break, is that going to be a full operational traffic light at that break? Or is it going to be just a cautionary traffic light at the break?
Yeah, and we've heard all those, and that's why we've studied those in detail. All 3 of those that you mentioned, we've studied all those in great detail. And it's also why we also agree with the fact that we need to collectively work together to try to get SHA to warrant that median break in that light, because it makes for an operational scenario that addresses all those concerns. Even though we believe that those concerns are addressed with the improvements, it's why we stand before you committed to funding it and building it if we can get it permitted. But with that being said, we have heard the concerns with Pointer Ridge Place and Pointer Ridge Drive. We are actively pursuing alternatives, maybe for improvements that are not in this report, with your staff with respect to certain improvements to Pointer Ridge Place. But we did study those as part of the traffic impact study. They do pass, even with existing and proposed conditions. So I'll let Mike elaborate more on that, but we did look at those, Mr. Rogers.
As Matt said, those comments are things we've heard consistently over the years, over the number of applications we've been in before you. We have committed to the city, and we've revised our traffic impact study to include the median break. We are in the process of setting up a meeting with the State Highway Administration. We've committed to the city that if we can get the state to approve these, we will build them. But ultimately, the state has to approve them. We we can't build them without their approval. There's several different options. They could do a full median break for in and out movement, a two-way median. That would take care of both scenarios. If the state doesn't want to allow a left turn out to go north, maybe they'd still allow a left turn in from the south. That would address one of the issues. The other issue, if they don't allow the left turn out, we think that if it happens, it probably has to be signalized for safety and tie the signals together. If they don't allow the signals, perhaps, and if they don't allow the left turn out, perhaps we could get the right turn out signalized and coordinated with southbound traffic from Mitchellville Road to the right turn out signal to Pointer Ridge Place, so we can flow traffic southbound and have the right turn go down and make a double left turn to return back to the north. We think that would solve the concerns about people not being able to get across southbound traffic over to the U-turn lane. There are options. Again, we've updated our study. We're trying to get that meeting set with the state so we can work through those questions.
So, Mr. Liner, thanks for that explanation. How far realistically do you think you're away from getting some sort of a answer from the state?
Typically, they have a 45-day review period for their traffic studies. If we sit down and meet with them, we might get some initial feedback, but I don't know if we would get a formal response on that. They would probably take the concerns in and then go back and review the study, and I suspect it would be a 45-day turnaround.
Have you gotten any feedback at all?
Not.
This is something that just came up. So I'm pretty sure you've probably been working this for months, if not years.
Well, they haven't seen the revised study yet, or they haven't seen the study yet.
Okay.
And so the last study that I believe the state saw was the rezoning back in 2013 or 14. And at that point, it did include left turn in and out, but they had made some comments that they thought that it wouldn't meet the warrants for signalization. And so it's been updated, and we'll just have to build on and take it from that point and try to get across the goal line.
Okay.
I have my concerns about, major concern is about the safe movement of traffic. Overall, I think the project is, it has some merit, it has some good points. I'm really concerned about, the overall project itself. I know that property has been languishing. It's been there for a long time. I know I've been in that office over there for at least the last 15 years, and it's Food Lion and Weiss and everybody else is, wanted to come through there and do something with it, and nobody's been able to do it. And I know that some of the residents there in Pointer Ridge definitely want to see something happen with it. But I think I would feel much more comfortable knowing that I had an answer from State Highway Administration in terms of what they will or will not allow at that median break. So that's.
Any other questions? I guess, yeah, my general question is just like for the other applicant for the case before is what is the end game here? What advantage does this property bring to the citizens of Bowie?
So I'll answer that question. I mean, in 2006 and prior to that, the city as well as the county undertook a very lengthy, time-consuming process to land plan out the Bowie and vicinity area. And as part of that process, they identified this property in particular as a mixed-use activity center. So it was determined then by the stakeholders involved at that time, 2004, 5, and 6, when it was adopted, that this was earmarked for a mixed-use development. This plan is consistent and in keeping with that policy. And so from that perspective, I can only answer by saying people smarter than me in 2004 and 5 and 6 that sat on this dais and were involved in the stakeholder meetings and that wrote the plan, reviewed the plan, adopted the plan, that earmarked it and identified it for mixed use, that made that determination that in so being mixed use, it'll do a number of things. It'll help activate Pointer Ridge Shopping Center. It'll help support the commercial office to the south. It'll also add housing and mix of uses to the Bowie area. I will say it's not within the city of Bowie, however, we would like it to be. And so from that perspective, you know, I think that's the best answer I can give, because planners, including city staff, determined that was the best use for this property, not a shopping center. And so we're trying to design a project that is in keeping with that plan, but doing it to the highest and best that we possibly can with everyone's feedback and input. The concerns with traffic are valid. Nobody on this development team or the owner currently or the contract purchaser is going to stand before you and say traffic is not a concern. It is a concern. It's been expressed. We have done study after study after study to address those. We are committed to making improvements regardless of whether the SHA approves the median break or not. There will be other infrastructure improvements made. We are going above and beyond that to some of the concerns that Mr. Rogers was made and some of the concerns that we have heard from not only Mr. Minor but citizens with respect to Pointer Ridge Place. We are actively looking at some improvements. They're not needed to meet the analysis as far as adequacy. It's adequate. It meets the test for an unsignalized intersection. That may not be the answer that we all want, because we work there, we live there, we drive it, we sit there and we try to get into the post office. But this applicant is committed and this team is committed to even going above and beyond that to see if there's something we can do. And we are exploring that, even though it's technically not needed. So other amenities that it's going to bring more homeowners to the area. We're providing pedestrian connections to the community center, which will further help activate that. We will be financially contributing to the school system with respect to a $3 million impact fee. And so, in addition to making infrastructure improvements. So I think there's quite a bit that has gone into and that we will all benefit from. Okay?
Question for staff. As a point of order, Mr. Minor and Mr. Stevens, if this parcel of property is not in the incorporation of the city, why are the applicants here today before us? Is this for out of courtesy, or, I mean, so in essence, do they require our approval to move their package forward?
They are here before us, even though they're not in the city, because we have a long-standing agreement with Park and Planning that all development applications within our planning area come through our process.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
We have people signed up to speak. Is anyone signed up to speak?
Is anyone signed up to speak?
There is no one signed up to speak on the list there.
Sure. If you guys sign up, I believe I did. Double check. Please. Is that for the other one or both of them?
No, ma'am. Yeah, I'd also like to make another comment about the school impact fee. Do you understand how that works? Okay, all right. Because those monies are not earmarked to come back to Bowie. So that's the problem. That's the situation that I think a lot of municipalities within the county.
Yeah, and I didn't represent that they were. Just to be clear, I didn't represent that they are earmarked.
Okay.
They are earmarked for school improvements,
Correct.
but they go to the county.
Correct.
And they're admittedly not earmarked, but that's the structure in which we all have to abide
Understand.
by. And certainly, any municipality that I appear before, whether it's Bowie or Greenbelt or College Park or any of them, that's a big concern. And this is the same answer. That's above any ability or power that I have to change that.
Understood.
But duly noted.
Okay.
It's certainly understood.
Has your team reached out to any commercial entities? I know that's for another
Yes.
another portion of the
So
detailed site plan.
Mr. Gold, who's here on behalf of CBR, he's in negotiations with the Rappaport companies to purchase those 2 parcels, assuming the subdivision is approved. But I would say the Rappaport companies, that's all they do is commercial retail development. I mean, they're a development, leasing, property management commercial company. They run and manage shopping centers throughout the region, Hilltop Plaza, for example. I mean, there's a number of centers that they run. If anybody could deliver a commercial tenant, and if they could have delivered an anchor commercial tenant and avoided having to go through rezoning and the conceptual site plan and trying to sell it, they would have. They couldn't secure one. So the change to 20,000, again, I think 20,000 is, to some of the questions before, I know we're going to disagree, but 20,000 is the ceiling. I don't think it's going to get that close to 20,000 square feet. It's going to be much smaller. It's going to be a more service-oriented type commercial retail. It's not going to be a big anchor type big box. It's going to be something smaller, whether it's coffee shops or things like that. Something like you would see at Amber Ridge, saving the bank and the library, but some type of potentially smaller inline, smaller commercial retail.
Okay.
But to date, we don't have a user. I think once this project moves forward and the homes come online, then you'll see a market, a need and a desire for tenants to come in. And then we'll have to come back before you at that time for a detailed site plan to talk about who it is, what it is, the architecture, and then make sure it's within the trip cap that's being established here, which, to your point, Mr. Skoltz, if it's a high traffic generator that's presumed, if it exceeds the trip cap, they can't go in here. So I hope we've addressed that. Maybe not to your satisfaction, but I hope we've addressed it.
Thank you. Okay, this time I will read the names of the participants who would like to present. If you could, please, when you come up, state your name and your address, please. We'll start with Derek Mallard, please.
Derek Mallard, Devonshire Estates. As I stated before in the earlier conference about the other, say, South Lake, once again, this is a development that I feel that does not, number one, I do oppose. This is one I still feel that doesn't add anything to the community and also take away. And one of the things that I heard and kind of bothered me is that every developer I heard said, well, we'll give to the school. I've heard the same song and dance, I want to say, from the MGM to every developer that comes around, we're going to add to the school. What guarantee is that? Because I haven't seen, I heard people say, but I've never seen anybody or the money ever get to the school. So to me, that's a question that I have right there. And I know the MGM is not anything that this council does, but it was just an example of what I say. When developers come in, they have all these promises and guarantees, but none, I never see any of them. And thank you.
So what he just mentioned was that the $3 million impact fee they pay to the county. So it goes to the county. They can't control whether that money actually goes to the schools, because $3 million could darn near fund an elementary school just from that little impact area over there off of 301. Just think about that. Now imagine if it was more like the first project that we talked about. You might be able to get an elementary school and a middle school out of that. You know what I mean? But that's part of the issue. Bowie doesn't have the final say in Bowie. In addition to that, when they pay that money, and they have to, that's part of the contract, it goes to the county. So we need to start holding the county accountable for getting that money back into Bowie. That's where the trouble is.
And I do understand that, and that was one of the problems that I've seen that's been going on. I can't say no one has ever challenged the county, but I think this is something that we have to start doing more now than later, because we keep getting false promises and hopes, and that the county will look after our benefits. And I do believe, as Bowie residents, we need to start looking after our own benefit.
Yeah, they're doing their job, but I mean, I 100% agree with you.
I understand.
You got to hold the county accountable.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Kevin Dobie.
Gentlemen, Kevin Dobie. I live in Point Ridge, 15907. I've been fighting these developments a lot lately, and they start to remind me of this song from this show called Weeds, and the song goes, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. I mean, honestly, gentlemen, I'm fed up. I'm tired of the unfulfilled promises, the lies, and the blatant disregard for God's green earth. I mean, I can't blame the developers anymore. They don't live here. Why should they care about our safety, our seniors, or our schools? Money is their God. Gentlemen, the citizens of Bowie are drowning in the influx of new developments. You all know it. South Lake, Amber Ridge, Pecan Ridge, they will do nothing for our city besides destroy more of our much needed green spaces. And this illusion that commercial retail will suddenly revive itself and bring a benefit to any community it's just a falsehood. It's a fairy tale. Just drive around Prince George's County and you can see the skeletons and the ghosts of old shopping centers. It's not going to work. That's not our answer. I spent about 2.5 months knocking on doors, hearing the voices of citizens. We're tired of the overdevelopment. And honestly, these developments don't bring anything new. They're not sustainable. They don't come equipped with solar panels. They take away permeable surfaces. The last 3 years in Maryland, we've seen record rainfall. We all know what happened to Ellicott City, and there's nothing that can protect the citizens that live here now from floods. And again, the developers don't care. So gentlemen, please, when you consider these projects, I'd like you to think outside of the box. This isn't the only answer. These are the only people that come to the table and offer things at the moment, but this isn't the only answer. So please, consider that. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
It's a good show.
You know.
Mr. Chair, may I respond? May I respond?
Yes, sir. Please.
Yeah, I just want to just to Mr. Mallard's point. I hear you. I hear you. I mean, nobody is standing before you and giving you falsehoods or misleading or telling lies. I don't have the luxury to tell a lie. If I tell a lie, my career is over. I'm not providing lies. I will be forthright and tell you that the law requires a developer to pay not only public safety impact fee, but the school facility surcharge. That is mandated by the state, delegated to the county. It's in subtitle 4 of our county code. It's in subtitle 10 of the county code that requires the payment of those at the time of building permit. DPI requires it. Every builder pays it. The money is earmarked for school. That's the obligation of the development community on that regard. Is that what the city of Bowie wants or any municipality wants? Probably not. Would I love to be able to stand up before you and say, look, we have to pay this and it has to go to the city of Bowie? Of course I would. I don't have that control. I want nothing. I mean, but that's a legislative issue beyond even the city council. So I just want to be clear that no one's making false promises here. No one's saying we're going to do this and then there's a bait and switch. That's just simply not the case. Mr. Dobie, I don't know what's referenced with respect to unfulfilled promises or fairy tales or not sustainable and the floods and so on. Prince George's County and the state of Maryland in general, Prince George's County specifically, has some of the stringent stormwater regulations in the state. We are required to control stormwater, both quantity and quality, to the maximum extent practical through environmental site design. This project incorporates kind of old practices, which is the existing pond that's in the northeast corner of the property. There's actually two today. One is in the back western portion that will go away. It's been piped and it will feed to the existing pond in the northeast corner, and as well as a number of microbiome retention facilities to treat quantity and quality control. So as far as and that's all regulated by the county and the state and everyone else. So to throw forgive me, but to throw shade on the development community because of the fact that something happened in Ellicott City, which is not regulated like Prince George's County, is really unfair. We do have stormwater concept approval. We still need to get stormwater technical approval that occurs with erosion sediment control plans. All that is regulated, highly regulated. So I just want to just make sure that the record's clear on that. It's not that we just throw these things out there and just build what we want to build and we don't have any regulatory framework, because we absolutely do.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor. Ms. Shirley Ballard?
Good evening. I am Shirley Ballard. I live at 16611 Peach Street. I live in the hills of Mulligan Station, which is just across the street from where they are proposing this project. We can't get out of our development in the mornings because of traffic going north. I live on the north side. Getting home in the evening is a hassle. I know specifically where he's talking about, that little strip mall over there. Those people can't get in and out of there. We have an accident on 301 North, I would say at least once a month. Can you imagine what that does to the traffic? The other part is that we are overdeveloped. We don't need any more houses over there. We don't need any more, what are these places called where you sell stuff? We don't need any hotels. We don't need any clothing stores, fast food places. We've got all of that. The people who are presently in these places aren't able to keep them. Why are we bringing in more? I'm totally opposed. They make a good presentation, but they don't live there. I need to get in and out of my house. I've lived here for 19 years. What is this going to do to me? What is this going to do to us? Let me see if I have anything else to say. I didn't come prepared to speak. But the police department, we can't get them there for just general stuff. We bringing in 200 more townhouses? Police, we don't, isn't there a void? That's not the word I want. Don't we have a shortage of policemen in Bowie, even though this is not a part of the Bowie, city of Bowie? Yes, there is a shortage of policemen. I understand they're going to be building a new fire department. I'm not sure why we need a new fire department, but if we need a new one, where is it going to go? Let's put it there instead of these houses. We probably need a new post office because the one that we have now does not serve the population. We're parking on both sides of the streets trying to get into the post office. I'm just terribly, terribly opposed. And again, I live directly across the street, 301 North, where they're proposing this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, we have one more speaker, Jackie Lord.
Hi, my name is Jackie Lord. I live on Plainview Lane in the Pointer Ridge section. I understand the developers have followed all the rules and regs with traffic. They've done their studies, but when I listen to them, they're focused primarily on 301 and traffic going in and out of that. Pointer Ridge Place is almost an afterthought. Since I live in this area, first problem with 301 is, and it's been mentioned before, is if you're going to make a U-turn at Pointer Ridge, you're going to have to go across traffic. That problem happened when they built the Walmart. They had a fatal accident there, at least one, and they have tried to adjust that, but only by putting in barriers to keep people from going directly across. In rush hour, you can't get across. That traffic is backed up. So people that are coming from that area, meaning the development, they're not stupid. they will learn very quickly that the way in and out is not on 301. It's going to be Pointer Ridge Place. That happens everywhere in Bowie. All right, people find the best way in and out. And I can see in the years I've been here on Mitchellville Road, when it's rush hour, the traffic has increased immensely because people are bailing out of 301. Pointer Ridge Place is not even a 2-lane road at times. It cannot handle that traffic. And when you go onto Pointer Ridge Drive, there's very little time to get between Pointer Ridge Place and the light. And if it's any time near rush hour or a busy time, traffic is backed up, stopped at the light. So I would like people to really consider the traffic problems, because it's going to cause problems to the community, and it's a major safety issue, in spite of the fact that all the rules and regs have been followed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, the public hearing is now closed. Turn to my colleagues and open the floor for a motion.
A question of staff. Joe, Frank, question that I have is, can any conditions be added to this? Are you open to adding conditions to your report?
What I would say to that, Mr. Rogers, is that it's a consensus decision that you're making tonight. You're just providing some direction, and you can add or subtract from the staff recommendation as you see fit to do so.
Okay. Having said that, thank you, Joe. Having said that, I would like to know, or see how we discuss among ourselves here, conditioning this on getting feedback from State Highway Administration in terms of what they're going to do about the median break at the entrance to that property. And I say that because all too often we make decisions that will be binding, and we'll wish later on that we had said, well, maybe how could we have done this thing a little bit better. But I think that before I could feel comfortable voting yes on this, I would want to know what State Highway Administration is going to do at that intersection.
Mr. Rogers, that's exactly why I asked the question before this public hearing started. Because if we give the blessing to the preliminary plan as presented, in essence, we're pretty much blessing the detailed site plan as well. And I have the same concerns. I mean, there's nothing against your project, guys. I'm sure it's going to be a quality project. But I can't sit up here with full conscience and say that I don't think we're going to have some kind of safety issue unless we hear from the experts at State Highway. If you guys get your okay from State Highway, I have no problem whatsoever approving the preliminary and also the detailed.
Yeah, I would just like to throw out, I think I was at the stakeholders meeting. I asked this question before, and I'm going to ask it again. Have you thought about maybe a reconfiguration of that property to go from a high-density scenario to something medium to low density, which would inadvertently will decrease the amount of traffic? So I have heartburn. It doesn't sit too well with me knowing the traffic scenario in that particular area of the city. The State Highway Administration, I would think that you would have a better feel of which way they're leaning, knowing how critical that particular aspect of this property, of this development project is. I would like to know if maybe you can maybe reconfigure or thought about reconfiguring the property.
May I address that?
Yes, please.
I know the public portion has concluded, but I think it warrants a response in the sense that, so this is MXT zoned. The MXT zone minimum density allowed is a 1.4 FAR, floor area ratio. This project is probably like at a 0.3 or a 0.4. So as far as, so it is very low density from that perspective, and it's also significantly lower density than when it was commercial shopping center for a 200,000 square foot. And I want to be careful. The lower, even though we are at a low to medium, I'm going to say medium density, not low. I certainly don't want to misrepresent that, but it's a medium density. It's not a high density. Anything at a 1 or higher, to closer to 1.4, I think you get kind of that. Even though it's the minimum allowed, it's probably considered a little higher. We're probably at a medium density at 0.3 or 0.4. From an MXT standpoint, we're low. But going even lower, there's no chance we'll ever get that median and that light, because it was only barely warranted with the 2,000 square foot shopping center. So, there's economics at play here. There's the zoning that's at play here. There's the planning that's at play here. So, we feel very comfortable that we've kind of hit the sweet spot with respect to the density. It's on the medium side.
Okay.
It kind of gives us something to go to the state but to Mr. Rogers' point, to Mr. Skol's point, if this board were compelled to introduce a condition, I just want to put this on the record, compelled to introduce a condition to the effect of, whether it's even a conditional approval subject to SHA, and I heard you say if SHA says we're good, we're good. We will do whatever SHA requires us to do. We have to, because they're the permitting agency. So, we're fine with that. We understand that. If that needs to be memorialized, we're okay with it. But we will do whatever SHA requires us to do.
All right, thank you, Council. All right, I'm open for a motion, please.
Think how to put this. Joe, you may have to help me out with this, but my motion would be that approval be conditioned on getting state highway approval to put in a median break at the entrance to the Amber Ridge subdivision. Is that sufficient?
Mr. Rogers, this is a motion on the preliminary plan, right? We're going to have 2 different motions from the board. So if you wanted to, I think the way that you phrased it, that's the consensus of the board should be that you said you wanted to hear from the State Highway Administration before the other conditions of the staff would be supported. So it's a consensus of the board,
right,
that you should get that input before these other, before you would recommend approval with these conditions.
Or if it goes through, if SHA approves it, then we go with it. Which one are you saying?
Right. So for the detailed site plan TAC, DSP TAC 19040, I move that we table a decision on the consensus of the board be that we table a decision on approval of this plan until we hear what the input will be from State Highway Administration on providing a median break at the entrance to the Amber Ridge subdivision.
And if I could just comment for a second, I think normally we would suggest that you not make conditional type, sort of subject to type recommendations. But in this situation, because you don't have a quorum, you're really indicating to the council what your feeling is as this group of 4 members that are sitting on this case, It's not really a binding recommendation. So I think it's okay to phrase it in this conjecture type way that you're doing. And I wanted to make that clear, because normally on a regular meeting when we have the full board here, we would try to discourage you from doing that. We'd like you to make a decision, affirmatively one way or the other.
Right.
But in this case, you're conveying your uncertainty or your cautiousness, and I think that's perfectly okay in this consensus situation.
Okay. Thank you. That was the motion. That was the motion, consensus motion of the board, to delay until we get a State Highway Administration decision.
Okay, so we have motion on the floor by Mr. Rogers that it is the consensus of this board, or of this body right now, the 4 members, to table the decision until further clarification can be made by the applicant referring to SHA approval or disapproval of a median break.
That would be contingent on the preliminary subdivision for
That's only for detailed site
19032.
plan, right, DSP, as it applies to DSP. TAC 19040.
No,
No?
that's the detailed. We have to approve the preliminary prior to the detailed. So,
Correct.
yeah,
So do I need to restate the motion?
yeah.
Okay, so to restate the motion, more applicably, this is for the Amber Ridge preliminary plan of subdivision number 4, TAC 19032, that we table a decision on approval of this plan until, that the consensus of this body that we table this decision until we have clarification from State Highway Administration as to their willingness to approve or disapprove of a median break at the entrance to the property. On 301.
Mr. Minard, I'd second that, but I would like to make an amendment that not only the median, but any other upgrades or whatever amenities subject to the state highway. Does that make sense? I mean, basically what I'm saying is that let's have state highway give its full blessing.
I think your intention is clear, yes.
Okay. So I second that.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Rogers, seconded by Mr. Scos. Is there any further discussion? All right, barring none, I take a vote.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right.
So we have it, 4 ayes to table, to table the decision until we get further clarification from State Highway Administration in consideration of the preliminary plan of subdivision 4 TAC 19032. Thank you, gentlemen.
Do we need a motion? What do we do with the other one? The detailed site plan? Preliminary.
Yeah. Yeah, so they were trying to pull a fast one.
All right, we just need to make a motion on that, just for official record, gentlemen. So if someone could please pass a motion for detailed site plan, DSP TAC 19040.
No, DSP 190.
I make a motion to disapproval.
Should we table it depending on 12?
Yeah, obviously, if we've tabled the preliminary, we can't approve the detail. I mean, we could, but it would not be normal protocol.
Staff, can you help us out a little bit here, staff? So as we're not wasting people's time.
Well, once again, this is a consensus decision of the
Right.
board tonight, so all you want to do is signal to the council what your feeling is about where we are right now, and you just have to put that into words. If you don't have problems with the detailed site plan as it's been presented to you and the conditions that we've recommended, which the applicant has agreed with, you could preface your statement of support for the detailed site plan with this caveat as you used in the preliminary plan, which is that you really think that everything should be held until the State Highway Administration has given their decision about the access to the property.
Yeah, I guess I'll retract the first motion and go by what you just said, Joe, that obviously this is not a approval, disapproval, but I suggest that we make the same caveat, same condition on DSP 19040, that it be tabled until we have approval by State Highway Administration.
Second.
All right, so the motion's been made by Mr. Scopes and seconded by Mr. Rogers. Any discussion? No? All right. Vote.
All right.
Aye. 4-0. Thank you.
And for the record, before we close the record, the record's closed now, but one thing I want to say that to our community is that we don't want to put all of the illness and the responsibilities for development or overdevelopment on the developers. And I say that because when we have by right development, that is what it is. It's by right. They have the right to develop land that they own. The problem that we have is legislatively and with the way the laws are written. And if we're not satisfied with the way the county is holding people responsibility for schools, for fire protection, and the other adequate public facilities, then it's our responsibility to vote and to make sure that our voices are heard, and and that's where we want to make our real difference and our change at. Because all of us, we want to have good schools, we want to have good fire protection, we want to have all of the amenities, but it has to be paid for, and we don't want to pay for it out of our property taxes. So we have to have a good balance in our community of how things get allocated and how they get paid for. So, and so I just want to say that the real power that we hold is in the power to vote, to make sure that we have the regulations that are in place that are supportive of what we really want in the community.
Very well said, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, ladies. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to exclude you. Thank you very much. All right. Not at all.
Yeah, they can't. No, you can't approve the minutes because you can't take a vote. So we'll have to hold those to your next meeting. I wanted to mention also, we were trying to get the meeting set up for November 26th, but we need 5 people for a quorum. And we heard from Mr. Galato today. He's been in the hospital and he's going into rehab facility and he's not going to be available. So it looks like that November 26th meeting I'm going to have to cancel because we're not going to have five members present.
Maybe SHA will hear something and we can combine that one with this extension.
We're not going to have 5.
Joe, I got diagnosed with pneumonia yesterday.
Oh.
Okay, and I'm about ready to go.
Well, what I'd like to do is
But we
suggest,
got to, in all seriousness, you know, maybe as a request, as a long-term board member, especially since we've reduced our numbers, when we have holiday weeks like Memorial Day, especially Thanksgiving, that we try not to schedule anything. I know we have our, you know, our mission of every second Tuesday and fourth Tuesday, but, you know, we really have to make concessions. If we were getting paid to do this, it'd be a different story.
I understand, and what I'd like to suggest is if we can't do it that week, and it doesn't look like we are able to, I'd like to do it either the following Tuesday or the second Tuesday in December. So I'll be sending out a poll to make sure we have 5 members so we can process this variance case. That's about all we can do is poll you and try to make sure we got
Yeah.
enough people.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Motion to adjourn?
You don't need one.
You just have to wave your hand and say the meeting is over.
Yes.
Perfect.
All right.
I'm hungry and tired.
It's, yes, it is. It is
That was difficult. That was
21:38. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mark, behind the glass.
How's it going, guys? Good work.
difficult.
Adjourned.